Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Lady Leadership Podcast. I'm really excited to have with me today Ingrid Messner. And Ingrid is the author of a new book, which is called Naturally Successful Leadership, showing how to manage your energy, influence others, and create positive impact. Beautiful.
Yes, yeah. Thanks for having me. It's very exciting.
Tell me, let's kind of dig straight into it. Talk to me about being naturally successful and energy and influencing others.
Yes, so over the course of the last, 30 years or so, I've been working in different ways with leadership, but I also always had a passion for understanding nature and other culture, and especially indigenous people when I came to Australia from Germany. And so I've had a lot of experiences. So one of my aims was to bring it all together and make it very accessible for business people, because there is a lot we can learn from indigenous cultures about sustainability and different ways of leadership and community. And then also, from nature. How does nature do it? Because it has worked for many, many years.
Yeah.
And plus our bodies, they haven't evolved in the same speed as Facebook or Google or the internet. So we are still sort of like the bodies we had before. And so I thought, if I can bring all of that together and make it really valuable for business people, then hopefully leading becomes more easy for them. And that's why I thought, if you lead yourself well, you will come up with a different energy that your stakeholders respond to. This is the leading of others.
Mm-hmm.
But also at the same time, you need to be aware of all the context, the surroundings, and that there could be many different ones. So that's why I called the subtitle of the book, How Wise Leaders Manage Their Energy. That's the self-leadership, influence others. That is the leading others.
Mm-hmm.
And then create positive impact is actually leading in a system and being crystal clear of what you think success looks like and how you define your impact and all of that. So it's basically the connection of everything and making it easy to understand, because some of the other things are quite complicated. So my role is more the role of a connector between all the different worlds.
I like that. And I've noticed now too that you've got pictures of nature behind you. So I've noticed that you've got a picture of Uluru.
Uluru.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. And do you know what? I've got a picture that's an energy statue from Hyde Park. I don't know whether you've ever seen that in London. It's that horse and that explorer represents energy. So
no, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's my favorite.
Nice.
It's my favorite statue in Hyde Park, and my husband got a friend of his who's a photographer to go and take a photograph of it years ago. So and it's that exploring, that looking out, that sort of moving forward, that energy piece. So well, there you go.
Yeah. So there's a connection.
Yeah, let's talk about leading yourself then and your own energy, because I think this is so important. And I had And I think how you turn up and what the stories that you're telling yourself and what's in your mind really does influence how you interact with others, doesn't it?
Yes, it's a little bit when, as a leader, you enter the room. Some people call that leader presence or leadership presence, because people will pick up on the energy that you bring into the room immediately. And most of the time very unconscious, like subconsciously. Because they would not be able to voice it and give it a label, but still they notice, this person comes across as very positive or negative, or it pulls me up, inspires me, or they pull me down because they're already themselves not feeling well. So other people notice it. So that's why I usually say to the people that I coach and mentor, it's like, if you haven't got the energy, you can only give what you have got. So to your team, if you want to inspire your team, you first have to be inspired yourself. And to be actually able to do this, your physical body has to be well. So and mental health as well. So health is a very holistic concept, and quite often we only talk about one or two aspects of it. Right? For example, right now with the lockdowns, we talk a lot about mental health and maybe you have to do exercise to be well and so on. But we really miss many of the other aspects of health. And so I had several health challenges that made me hugely aware that if you want to recover from something, you really have to take care of all the different aspects. So, for example, I broke my knee about 4 years ago, and then had to have surgery. And then literally from the hospital, they sent you home, say, oh yeah, now you had the surgery, everything's repaired. Go and see a physio, but no one really tells you about all the other elements, because it has got a flow-on effect on like your social life. So a community is around bushwalking and other nature activities. So having a broken leg means that I didn't have the community. And the conversation that come with this impacts their mental health and emotions. And I spend a lot of time in nature, like meditating. So I couldn't go out and have this nature connection. And it all started with the broken leg, and the healthcare system not, for example, telling me, oh, to heal faster, you need to really take care of your sleep, your food, get the right nutrients or supplements, and get enough rest and do these exercises. The physio, when even the word says it, physio, we focus on body. It's all compartmentalized, and the same thing sort of is true for business. Like 3 months into the healing journey, I woke up one night and thought, no, there is a system behind it. I'm missing something that I still could do to heal better, because the injury is a quite long recovery process. So I sat down, wrote down like a system map for what do I need to heal better, and then looked at it and said, actually, this is the same topics I talk about when I coach teams or leaders. When they have to think about all the different areas. What it basically is what's in the book. Like, you have to lead yourself, but then you have to lead other people, in my case for the healing, like my team of health professionals and other, up to the point where, because I couldn't do some of the offsite work in, for example, Blue Mountains. So there's a financial impact. So even to that degree. And then obviously there's a system around you. Like in my case, I was lucky, I had enough, my home environment was very helpful. And some other things in terms of work, how I could organize it was also helpful. But in business, we're not always thinking along all these lines. When we are rushed and it's urgent or in the moment, we get told it's focus on one thing. And that has its benefit, but it's also dangerous, because you might not focus on the right thing, because you actually have the blinkers on. And then with the blinkers, you actually don't see what else you could do. And so part of my role and in the book is to help people to take a different perspective, just to open their eyes on what else might be possible. And also noticing and accepting there is not necessarily the one best solution.
And what are some examples of that then, Ingrid?
You mean in the business world?
Yeah.
So for example, one person that works in corporate, and I was asked to coach them around the performance element that they wanted to develop in a certain area. And then we started talking, and then I realized she is a single mom, has got 4 children at home.
Oh yeah, wow.
Has this full-time job, and there were a few other things going on where then ultimately we ended up saying, look, we first have to get organized with this one area in the home environment.
I was going to say, get her a housekeeper or something.
So something.
Yeah.
Get some free time that you can get your health in order and be more resilient. And then actually we can only come back to thinking about what you do at work. Because if we constantly talk about what's going on at work, but never really talk about the other elements, then it will never be sustainable. You might make short-term progress, But then the moment the coaching ends, you fall back into the problem area because you still haven't organized your underlying support systems.
Yeah. And I mean, that's so true, isn't it?
Yeah. One of the support systems is obviously how can she organize her home life with the children and everything. And the other thing is how can she organize a little bit of free time to take care of her own health. So that's
and when you say health, you might mean she's got some free time to just spend time on herself, doing something for herself that she enjoys.
Just go for a walk.
Yeah.
Without children.
Yeah.
or even
coffee.
Coffee, or carve out some time maybe to meditate or do some other practices that help you to connect spiritually, so that you sort of still stay connected to your overall life purpose. And the people I work with, they have very, very different practices to do that. But all of these practices, no matter what it is, it needs a little bit of time and a routine. And if you're in an environment, for example, at the moment with lockdown, the home environment for everyone is very different, because some people have a lot of opportunity to do these things at home because they have enough space and no one is disturbing them. But if you have like 4 children, naturally you will be disturbed. So you might not be able to do it at home. So you need a bit more time maybe to walk somewhere else, to a park.
Yeah.
And all of that is impacting ultimately the performance and well-being at work. So it's a thing. And I just read somewhere in the Financial Review, so a story about when people at the moment are really overworked because they get given too many tasks, and health deteriorates and more people going closer and closer to burnout, then ultimately no employer benefits from it. No one really,
because you're not working at your best performance. And so I had a question before, which is like, if you are struggling with your energy, if you're struggling with how you're turning up, what should you do? But I think you've kind of answered that with this example as well, is, figure out how you can carve out some time for yourself, figure out what are some underlying things that are impacting your energy, spend some time in nature. Talk to me about that. Because I enjoy spending time in nature too. So I actually own a horse, and so I spend a lot of time in nature and spend a lot of time with my horse. So they're
very special because horses respond more to how you show up and how you feel without words, because they can't talk.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
In a way,
you've got to be present.
Yes, you have to be present.
We talked about that you grew up in Germany before this call. Did you horse ride when you were younger?
No, not really. No. But what we had is, because I grew up in a very small village that was sort of in a valley between 2 more hills, not mountains, but hills, and lots of forest. And we had this thing going out in the forest every weekend and doing walks. And then during the week, where I grew up was literally in the business of my parents, which was next to like a small river and a meadow and large trees. So from a very young age, I could like roam around, but it was this side by side. So one side, the business, which is like a construction business. And then on the other hand, you have nature. So, and having both at the same time was very beneficial to really be aware of that there's something. And the other thing I realized with nature, so nature, first of all, we always have the sense that it's outside of us, which is actually not true, because we are nature. Because we are all connected, and indigenous cultures would most likely share more of that. When you go out, for example, in bush or forest, you're never really alone, because all the different plants and trees are like family. And the moment you slow down enough and spend enough time on your own in nature, you realize a lot more how you're interconnected. So, for example, a few weeks ago on Audible, the audiobooks, they had the free audiobook of the German forestry worker Peter Wohlleben on the secret language of trees.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And he had a one, and it's in English, and but I first actually read it in German. And he has a wonderful way of describing what trees do with each other, how they communicate, how they support each other, and what's necessary. But what's more interesting is that they communicate also by sending out chemicals. And then when you imagine you go out to the bush or any forest really with trees, and you inhale what they're putting out there. So you immediately, we don't think about it very often, but the breathing in and breathing out, because you breathe in the same air. So there is a connection. And by breathing in certain things, the Japanese realized that when they put up the concept of forest bathing, Shunryoku, where it has a healing effect just by being there in the presence of the trees. And part of it is you could actually measure the biochemical processes that happen. And we always think, oh, it's just the visual. It's so nice to look at the green tree. That's one part. There's research on that colors. For example, when you're in hospital and you have a view of something green, there's research that the healing time reduced by X%.
Oh, wow.
Just by the color and looking at a landscape in a certain way. And it doesn't even have to be a real landscape. You could have a photo and it still has got a positive impact. And so there is another practice around train of thought, like the theory on biophilic design, how you create the environment around you. So, but all of these have in common, it's basically the same, where it means we think nature is out there. Let's take a tree as an example, and we are here. But ultimately, there is a lot of connection happening in an intangible and invisible way that's impacting your well-being and your performance. That's why at the moment, even in lockdown, people really enjoy going out in a park and spending some time there. And it's like an unconscious longing to do something nice for yourself. And then your body starts to relax a bit more, your mind relaxes. And then when your mind relaxes, you can think better.
Do you know what? I really know what you mean. And I think probably everyone listening to the podcast is probably thinking of a forest or thinking of somewhere that they go, and that action of sort of breathing it in, and it's the fresh air, it's the smells of the trees. In Australia, it's the smells of the gum trees and the wattle trees, etc. And that kind of, I think probably people are sort of visualizing. But I also remember I lived in London for a long time, and I used to say that I had kind of green grass deprivation from living in the city, and that I needed to go to the countryside or needed to go to the mountains so. Yeah, because of kind of that longing for nature.
Yeah, so it's a deep knowing that we have got, and that's what I meant earlier when I said our bodies haven't really evolved in like Facebook speed or Google speed, because our bodies still need elements of that. We need it on a biochemical level, but on an emotional and spiritual level as well. And so we search for it, and whenever it's possible, we get out and do something along the lines as best as we can. The only challenge when you live in the city, and with like many corporates before, when you go to the office space and you're in an air conditioning environment, there is a lot of sensory overwhelm. So then the only way to cope with it really is to shut down your senses a little bit. And so to go out in nature allows you to open up your senses again. So that it's like training your senses. And one of my teachers always said, if you're bored, it just means you haven't fine-tuned your senses enough. because the moment you fine-tune your senses, you will discover so many nuances and have the awareness and notice things that usually you would not notice.
Yeah.
So, but in an urban environment where, let's say,
oh, you've dulled them down. I get it.
Yeah, you dull them down a little bit.
You don't see. Yeah.
It's a survival instinct, so there's nothing wrong. It's more by being aware of it, saying, for example, in a business meeting, and your senses are not really aware, or dialed down a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Naturally, you have a tendency not to notice everything that's really going on.
Do you think that's a bit protectionist as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
It is. It is definitely.
Because I remember really distinctly last year catching my horse in a paddock and really noticing that the trees had changed and that they'd come out on the bark. Some of the bark had fallen off these gum trees, and there was this really vivid apricot color. And I really just remember like the colors of the trees, and also, you know, often the sort of the changing of season and the vivid green of the moss, and just seeing those things, do you know what I mean? And just kind of noticing those things. And I live in sort of, you know, Melbourne suburbia, and I'm not as conscious of the trees, say, my backyard changing, and, you know, do you know what I'm saying? And it is, yeah.
And I think that's part of that is now a problem for many in lockdown, because everything becomes quite equal. It's a little bit like Groundhog Day.
Yeah,
it's the same and the same and the same. Whereas when you would look outside, at the moment, I make an effort to get outdoors before sunrise. And then every morning, the sunrise is different.
Yes.
So it just makes me realize, so, okay, if today is not a good day emotionally for challenging, then the next day might look very different. So one day the sunrise is very gray, the next day it's very orange, then it's very pink, then it's very blue, then it's gray again. And so and noticing these rhythms, and it's actually sort of in nature very normal that you have the polarity of in a way black and white, but you realize it's not black or white, it is black and white. So it's happening both. And in leadership or in business in general, we too often think it's either or, where we should ask more the question, okay, and what? So it's the end. And so by just noticing more, you realize more of the nuances, like the patterns, what's happening, or the rhythm. And then you can follow that, because ultimately our bodies still follow seasons.
Yeah. Yep.
So if it's winter, then most of us, if you're still occasionally outside, you will notice. And then your body sort of goes into more like a resting, slowing down mode.
Yeah.
Where if it's spring, everything is coming up again, and it's a different type of, you can call it energy, but it's like a different way of being. And in business, we have other rhythms. So we have,
I was going to say,
quarterly results.
It's hard to match that with corporate and what's going on sort of in the corporate space, isn't it? Because I spent last year in the countryside for the year, and due to COVID, and it's the seasons, and you notice in the afternoon the sort of the air getting cooler, the nighttime coming in quicker, and as you said, you know, that you then noticing, you know, spring starting to be on its way. You really kind of see those seasons and see those changes, and that's hard to match it up with end of month and a quarterly review and all of that type of stuff.
And especially at the moment, everything being online and then also global. So for people working in a global organization, you might face the challenge of that you have meeting times that suit one time zone, but not another. So for example, someone in the US might be in more like an evening mood, whereas you in Australia might be in the morning mood. And so you come into a meeting where people come in with very different frameworks and context, and the energy they bring from that can be quite different. So if you would want to get the most out of the meeting and the team, you would have to make an effort to really understand what is the context of the person, like what type of are they still fresh or are they tired? And is it like, are we having a morning meeting? For most of them, then there might be a bit more creative, awake energy. But if it's an afternoon meeting, for most of them, most likely it might be a little bit dialed down, but it can be really good for like deep conversations.
Yep.
And so it's more about where is the energy when. Dan Pink has written a good book about that called When.
When.
Yep. And he lined out a few of these thoughts about when is happening what and what type of energy is around it. And so that's quite helpful if you think about you lead a team and then or for yourself even, when are you at your best?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And what are you doing then?
Because when you're at your best, what should you be doing?
Yes. So it has led me, for example, to do most of my coaching and meetings and conversations in the afternoon, and then in the mornings to be more creative.
Yeah, doing more your own deep work in the morning.
Yes.
Got it. And so leading others, then it's that, as we talked about, it's that understanding of the energy of the group and where different people's energy is coming from.
Yeah, that's one part. What I realized over the years is when people think about other people and think, for example, today we don't have the luxury of leading with authority. So most of the time you would have to convince them or influence them, others.
Yeah.
And so with the influencing piece, what still many people don't understand is that in a way, if you want to create behavior change for another person, ideally anyway, start with yourself. But if you are really focusing on another stakeholder or your team to change behavior, to really think about what causes actually behavior change. And there's a formula, quite simplistic. Obviously in real life there are other elements to it, but to think about it as a formula in the way, say, okay, there's always a trigger, like an event that happens that triggers the change. Then people have to have the motivation. That's the second element. And then they have to have the capability, so the skill to actually do what you want them to do. And the skill could be also triggered by, are they in the right environment to be able to do this? So it's not just the skill from them as a person, but are they in the right environment to deliver what you want them to do? So when you go then into a conversation with a stakeholder or in your team and think about, okay, do all the people in the team actually have the capabilities? Are they actually all having the motivation? Do they have enough clarity on what is this all about? And can they connect with that? Like with the big why of the project, the task? And then is there something that might trigger them to do it differently? And as humans are never simple.
No.
We're always complex.
And
so
it becomes
detective work.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question to ask a team as well. It's like, can you actually connect with this? Like, does this mean something for you? Because I think, I don't know that I've ever asked a team that sort of, it's kind of always inferred, isn't it? Or always assumed that people can connect with it. And maybe they can't.
Yeah, because in many organizations still, even sometimes startups, small entrepreneurs, there is a little bit like a top-down telling, this is my big vision, so you all have to follow that. I inspire you so much, and then you follow me.
Yeah.
That happens and it works. I'm not saying
like
that's true. Yes, a little bit. But in business, in a corporate environment, there is a necessity for that to a certain degree, because you can't change the system too quickly. But if you could create more spaces where people are more self-organizing and having conversations what's important for them, and bring that together and create like a shared purpose, most likely, there's never a guarantee, but most likely you will engage them at a deeper level, and they're more motivated to actually follow you in a project.
And that's got to be real too. Do you know what I mean? It can't just be lip service as well. It can't be like, oh, let's, create this, but then really kind of, like you said, not giving people that space to actually. And I think also sometimes it's difficult for people if they have been kind of shut down from that direction. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so in horse riding, we talk about shut down horses a lot. They're trained or they're made to perform a task, and then they don't have much say in it. And so they just kind of go into themselves and will kind of do the task, but then at some point they'll maybe all of a sudden bolt off, because they've just had enough. Do you know what I mean? And so it's like you said, just allowing people that space and having a voice and being able to talk, and without fear of being shut down or not listened to, or your ideas aren't important. And I think when people spend a bit of time in an environment and maybe not being listened to, it's actually hard to trust that you can talk and you won't be.
Trust is a really big thing, and it should be actually the first thing that any new leader of a team starts to build. Trust.
And how do you think you build trust then, Ingrid?
By truly being interested in the other person, what's going on for them, and then truly listen. I think,
and without judgment as well.
On Oscar Trimboli has written a really good book on deep listening, and somewhere in there he says we are taught communicating like speaking, but we hardly ever taught listening.
And
the same is true in indigenous cultures. So for example, before any indigenous community would start to do, let's call it business together, they would really build the relationship. So in Australia, for example, the welcome to country, or the acknowledgement to country, has actually, when you really think about it in a larger scheme of things, a really important value. Because if it's done well and people really understand it, what it basically means is when a person who comes from the area does it, so they're allowed to do the welcome to country. So they would say something along the lines, welcome to my area, which is bound by this mountain, this river, and all these things. So they would describe a little bit of the landscape, maybe the people. So immediately you get a sense of where they're coming from, because if you, for example, meet people who are coming more from the sea, the ocean, they have a different environment as if you come from the bush or the mountains. And so it gives you a better understanding. It's a little bit when traditionally networking, when we say, what do you do? That's that's where we focus on the doing
rather than
and the role.
Who are you?
And they focus more, okay, this is my community, my family, my environment. So you get a much richer picture.
I like it. I'm making lots of notes, Ingrid, here, if you're wondering what I'm doing. I've written 2 pages already. I interviewed a lady the other day, and who was a nurse, and she said at university that they'd actually done a course which was called listening, to be able to listen to patients. And I was like, I was blown away, and I was like, I actually think we all need to do that course.
I highly recommend Oscar Trimboli's work. On Facebook, he has got a lot of things, and on LinkedIn. And
I've added some books to my list of books while we've been on this call.
Lockdown, you might have a little bit of time.
That's right.
Or maybe not.
And then let's just link back to leading in a system then.
Yes. So in a system, what I mean by that, it is really about being aware of the context in which we operate. And quite often, for example, but people are not aware of how systems generally work. So, and in business sense, one of the most obvious things quite often is that we don't really think about when a person comes into a new role, the role has got a certain energy attached to it because of everything that happened with the person who was in the role before. And then the new person comes in, but they come into the role, and a lot of people would address more the role than them as a person.
Interesting.
So it could be that it happens in organizations that different people come into the same role and all fail. It's not necessarily that the people are not good, but it might be the setup of the role and the history of the role and the image of the role,
and the kind of the biases that other people apply to it. So how do you break that down then?
Is by making people more aware of it. And sometimes it could be like a cleansing process by having good conversations around, okay, when you come into a role, really finding out what happened before and get the full picture. And then have conversations with the people who are impacted by you in this role. And be very, very clear when you introduce yourself that you introduce you as a person and not you as the role. So that is one part of systems thinking. But also when you come into a new role, let's say a team leader, systems have orders. So, for example, when someone has been already there for quite a long time in the team, the system has an order like who came in first, who came in second, who is the newest person. Because there is a value in many times. The person who's been there the longest could have a lot of experience and could be really, really valuable on one hand, or they could be like a blocker. So it's more important to find out what are they, because they have been around for such a long time. Can they be of benefit for everyone and the new leader? Or will they be like putting barriers off so that no one can really go past them? So, and it's more an awareness piece where you have to be aware of all these invisible connections and relationships that are going on and that are heavily impacting your success as a leader.
And I think with COVID, it's a bit harder to see that as well, because it's behind, you can pick up on those sorts of things when you're physically in front of people, but those cues are a little bit harder when you're not seeing, say, who's going for lunch, or you're not seeing who's in an office, or you're not seeing who's walking off with someone else. Or
we removed this layer, and we also removed the layer of randomness. So you can't just randomly meet someone at the water cooler.
It's got to be a lot more organized.
So, and the randomness, I think, is one of the biggest missing elements. So you can recreate a little bit of that in the online space if you have the right tools, but not a lot. And I agree. So during lockdown COVID times, I think you have to make more of an effort to get to know the individual. And then it becomes like detective work where you have to piece together all the different perspectives. And that's at the moment I'm doing quite often systems maps with clients. And it sounds more complicated than it is. It's sometimes just simply writing down on a post-it note the names of different people. And putting them on a paper and then moving them a little bit around and see how it all feels and looks. And it's not a logical exercise. It's not an organigram like
it's not an org chart.
It's not a chart.
It's who's more connected to who, or who needs who, or who do you need to influence, or who
or who's closer together, or who's really far, or who is in conflict. So all these things can be seen when you put it out there, because as long as it's in your head, it's very hard to dissect. But there, when you put it on paper and you look at it, many times I experienced that people say, okay, I never saw it like this. But they had it in their mind. It's on the only exercise really is to put it onto a post-it note or notes, and then put them somewhere on the desk, on the floor, and have a look at it and walk around and look at it from like different angles. And these are all things that you would find in nature and indigenous cultures as well, that they do these things. Look from different perspectives. And by being aware of that, I think that's the leading in the system piece, the biggest.
Because that then dictates what you might do, or who you might align yourself with, or who you might not align yourself with, or who you might need to spend more time with or influence more, or who you might ask for help.
It gives you like a better perspective. I sometimes look at it like an eagle eye perspective. You see very clearly where there might be a possibility to have the biggest lever for change. Or at least, let's say, where you can try first. Because usually it takes several tries.
I was going to say, I always kind of look at things, and if I'll go one way, and if that doesn't work, I'll try another way, or I'll try something different, or I'll, I know, to kind of try and get an outcome.
It's a little bit like when an eagle flies over a landscape. They're very high up, so it's like big picture. But they have a very sharp view on their prey. on one thing. But there might be several preys, and so then they decide which is my priority to go for. And that's a little bit how I think about systems thinking, to see the whole landscape and then decide, okay, this looks like the best route, so I go there. And these are my people have to take with me. And instead of when you're too close to things and too much in the doing and the day-to-day stuff, it becomes really difficult to see all the different possibilities. So you only see maybe one or two because they're urgently in front of you because someone else is asking you for doing this. Instead of saying, no, I take a moment a day or so to answer your question, what we're going to do, and take a step outside and look at the whole. So all of my work is sort of very holistic, systemically focused, but with a point of, okay, how can we make this useful in this moment in time? And the last chapter in the book is actually around impact, and what that means is we often have a very screwed definition of success. So we talk about impact and we want to make a difference and all of that, but we never really sit down and become really clear of what for us personally success
what does that mean? What does success look like? That's I like that.
And then sometimes our boss or whoever else gives us saying, this is your KPI, this is your success measure. That's fine for a moment, but that might not actually be very motivating for you.
That's right. It could be, a strategy or a roadmap or something like that, but success might be who you influence or who you help, or the people that you assist in their careers, or that type of thing, or a grad program that you might set up or something like that. So there's a couple of layers to that, isn't there? I like that. So
definition of success is actually a big one.
What impact will I have, and what will success look like? It's interesting. So I've worked in quite a few leadership roles, and the more work that I do with horses, the more interesting it makes my corporate work, because I observe so much more than I ever did, and I pick up on energy so much more than I ever did. And
they're great teachers.
I probably spend more time, observing what's going on, or, not maybe, the body language and all of the rest of it, maybe not listening to the words as much.
There's a parallel to how indigenous cultures traditionally taught their children. And it's basically something along the lines, look, listen, learn. So, and the look is what you're describing. You observe.
Yeah.
They wouldn't ask questions.
Yeah.
The great children, to that degree, what we do nowadays, it's very hard for me sometimes as a coach to not ask questions. And I learned my lesson when we did a walk in the Red Center with some indigenous people, and I was asking too many questions that wasn't taken very well.
Oh, right. Okay.
So you observe.
Yeah.
And then you listen to what they want you to learn.
Yeah.
And you still don't ask the questions. And then you learn, and that can happen in many different ways. But that's more like the traditional way. And that exactly what you described with the horses. I think more people should do like learning from horses, or going in nature, learning from trees, or from the ocean. There's so much to learn, and we're cutting ourselves a little bit short by not noticing that.
Yeah.
So if you can bring more horses to work, that would be brilliant.
I used to have a cute little Shetland pony. She could have come to work. She could have gone in the lift, up the lift into the office. It's really funny because I've been told previously that sometimes I'm too quiet in an office environment or in a leadership environment, and it's because I'm observing and listening. And you know, and it's also like, well, if you actually ask a good question, I've also been told, oh, you don't say a lot, but then when you do, it's impactful. So, you know,
and that's a skill. That's actually, I think it's a sort of forgotten skill, because we were taught so much about presenting ourselves in leadership, whereas we should actually draw back and exactly what you described, observe and be aware, and then ask a question.
I mean, sometimes there's too many egos in the room and it's hard to get away.
It's a game
as well. Look, Ingrid, I've really loved having you on the show. I think it's really insightful, and I listen to quite a few horse people who are very much into the energy and healing, and you know, a bit of the woo as well. And and funnily enough, I was talking to someone last night who'd been asked to write a book about trees. She works with horses, and she's a writer, and and so I was laughing when you said to me about the tree, and she said she just couldn't do it because she's not that into trees. She's into horses. Do you know what I mean?
Yes,
so, I love that. It was like, because she'd said, oh, talking about trees at the moment is quite popular. So it's funny.
Yes, they are brilliant books about trees. So I love trees.
Yeah,
I
but
could write the book about trees.
You could write the book about trees. Well, they do talk about someone passing on an idea to someone else. So maybe that was what that's about. Do you know what I mean? Like the messages through the world. So
thank you.
So where's the best way for people to get in touch with you? Through your website?
Yes. Yeah. So that's most likely the quickest, to go to my website, which is my name, ingridmessner.com. Or if you search on LinkedIn, Ingrid Messner. I'm the lucky person that there are not too many people with my name. So you will find me.
Beautiful. All right. Well, thank you so much, Ingrid. Loved having you here.
Yeah, thanks so much, and see you.